My husband's mistress walked up to me at his funeral holding a folder. She wore a charcoal dress I had seen once before, hanging in the back of his closet in 2020. She introduced herself as Caroline, his partner of 9 years, and asked for the survivor pension, the lake cabin, and the Mercedes. My daughters froze with their coffee cups halfway to their mouths. I poured myself a fresh cup and added cream. I had known about Caroline since a Tuesday in March 19 when a hotel receipt fell out of Richard's coat pocket in the laundry room. What Caroline did not know was that I had spent 4 years preparing a second envelope. My name is Eleanor. I am 71 years old. I was married to Richard for 46 years, 3 months, and 11 days. I counted the days near the end, the way you count anything you are about to lose. The morning of the funeral, I ironed the blouse I planned to wear 3 times. Not because it needed it, because my hands needed something to do. The iron made that small hissing sound I had heard for almost 5 decades, and I remember thinking it sounded like the house was sighing along with me. Richard had been a good provider. That is the phrase people kept using at the reception. A good provider, as if a man's entire life could be summed up in a paycheck and a paid mortgage. I nodded and thanked them and refilled the coffee urn twice. I had nursed him through prostate cancer in 2014. I had ironed his shirts through 3 layoffs, 2 in the 80s and one when he was 59, and convinced no one would ever hire him again. I had cooked Sunday dinners for 46 years. Pot roast. Always pot roast. He liked the carrots cut thick. The reception was at our house. Our daughters, Margaret and Linda, were moving through the rooms with trays, doing the work I had taught them to do at funerals. Refill the coffee, smile at the cousins. Do not cry where people can see. I was standing by the window in the dining room when she came in. I knew before I turned around. Some part of me had been waiting for her for 7 years. The other women in the room were wearing navy or black. She wore charcoal, a tailored dress, expensive, the kind of expensive that whispers instead of shouts. She walked straight to me. She was holding a leather folder against her chest, like a schoolgirl holding her books. She was younger than me, not as young as I had imagined, maybe 60. Her hair was the color of wet sand. She said her name was Caroline. She said she had been Richard's partner for 9 years. She used that word, partner, as if 46 years of marriage were a roommate arrangement and she was the real thing. My daughter Margaret was standing behind her. I watched Margaret's face change. I watched the color leave it the way water leaves a sink. Linda came up beside her sister and put a hand on her arm. Neither of them said a word. Caroline opened the folder. She had a list, an actual list, typed on cream paper. She wanted the survivor pension from Richard's company. She wanted the cabin at Lake Shaw. She wanted the Mercedes. She said Richard had promised her these things. She said she had letters. I remember noticing she had a small coffee stain on the cuff of her sleeve. I remember thinking she had not noticed it yet. I remember almost wanting to tell her. Instead, I asked her if she wanted cream or sugar. She blinked. I think she had expected me to scream. I poured her a cup and handed it to her and walked into the kitchen. Linda followed me. She was crying quietly the way she used to cry as a child, with her shoulders very still. She asked me what we were going to do. I told her we were not going to do anything today. Today we were going to bury her father. Tomorrow was a different day. I want to tell you about the hotel receipt. It was a Tuesday in March of 19. Or maybe it was February. I remember the laundry room being cold, and I remember the receipt falling out of the inside pocket of his gray wool coat as I went to brush it. A hotel in Asheville, 2 nights, 1 king bed, room service for two, twice. I stood there for a long time holding that little piece of paper. Richard was upstairs watching the news. I could hear the anchorman's voice through the floor. I folded the receipt twice and put it in the pocket of my own apron. I never mentioned it. Not that night. Not ever. That was the first one I found. After that, I started looking, not obsessively, calmly, the way you check the smoke detector batteries. I found more receipts. I found a charge on a credit card for a jeweler in Charlotte. I had never been to Charlotte. I do not wear that kind of necklace. Caroline, I learned later, did. People always ask, in stories like this, why she did not leave. I have thought about that question for years. The honest answer is that I did not want to be the woman my mother had been. My mother left my father in 1962 and spent the rest of her life apologizing for it to anyone who would listen. She apologized to grocery clerks. She apologized to her sister. She died apologizing. I did not want to apologize. I wanted to think, so I thought. The first person I called was an estate attorney named David Pruitt. My father, who died in 2008, had left me a sizable inheritance, a farm in Pennsylvania, some shares in a regional bank, a small portfolio my father had built carefully over 50 years. Richard had always called it our money. I had always called it our money, too. I had been raised to be generous like that. David and I met for the first time at a coffee shop in Wilmington in May of 2019. He was about my age. He had been my father's lawyer, too, briefly, near the end. He asked me what I wanted. I told him I was not sure yet. I told him I needed to understand my options. He nodded and ordered another coffee, and we talked for 2 hours. By the time I went home that afternoon, I had begun to understand something I had not understood before. The farm in Pennsylvania was still in my name only. My father, who had never trusted Richard, had been very careful about that. The bank shares were in my name only. The portfolio had been mingled, but only on paper. The original deposits could be traced. For the next 4 years, slowly and quietly, I unwound things. David called it restructuring. I called it housekeeping. I never raised my voice at Richard. I never confronted him. I made him pot roast on Sundays. I ironed his shirts. I went with him to his oncology appointments and held his hand in the waiting room and brought him soup when he could not keep down anything else. He was sick again in 2022. Not the cancer, his heart, this time. I sat by his hospital bed and read to him from the newspaper and adjusted his pillow and refilled his water cup. And every Wednesday, while he was at his men's breakfast or his cardiology appointment or just downstairs watching the news, I drove 40 minutes to David's office and signed papers. I want to tell you about the kitchen phone. We had an old landline that hung on the wall by the pantry. It had a long, curly cord that my daughters used to wrap around their fingers when they were teenagers. Richard refused to give it up. He said cell phones gave him headaches. In the spring of 2020, I bought a small recording device at a store I had never been to before. I paid in cash. The clerk did not look up. I installed it on the landline the way the instructions said. I waited. It took 11 days. He was on the phone with someone and he thought I was at the grocery store. I was actually in the laundry room, folding towels, breathing very slowly. He said her name. He said Caroline. He said he was sorry. He said it meant nothing. He said his wife was a good woman, but they had not been close in years. He said he could not leave because of the money. He said it would be easier when she was gone. He did not specify which she. I folded 6 more towels. Then I went upstairs and made the bed. I never played that recording for anyone. Not for Margaret, not for Linda, not for my sister, not for David at first. I kept it on a small flash drive in a tin in my underwear drawer next to my mother's wedding ring. The doctor said it was a sudden cardiac event. He said Richard would not have suffered. I thanked him. I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table in my coat for a long time without taking it off. The funeral was on a Thursday. Caroline came on a Thursday. I had imagined her face many times over the years, and the real face was both more ordinary and more disappointing than I had pictured. She had a small mole on her left cheek. Her shoes were beautiful. The reading of the will was the following Tuesday. David held it at his office. Margaret and Linda came. Caroline came too, with a lawyer of her own, a thin man in a gray suit who kept clicking his pen. David read the will calmly. The house was already in my name. The investments were already in my name. The cabin at Lake Shaw had been quietly transferred to a trust in 2021. The Mercedes had been leased, not owned. The lease ended the week after Richard died. Caroline's lawyer stopped clicking his pen. Then David said there was a second envelope. He had been instructed to open it only in the presence of Caroline Whitaker. I had written her last name on the outside myself, in pencil, 4 years earlier. Inside the second envelope were 3 things. A copy of the recording from the kitchen phone on a small flash drive, labeled in my handwriting. a cease and desist letter from David's firm, naming Caroline specifically regarding any future claims on the estate or the pension, and a single sheet of paper with one sentence typed on it. I knew about you since March. I just took my time. Caroline did not cry. I had expected her to cry. Instead, she set the flash drive down on the table very carefully, the way you set down something hot. Her hand was shaking. That was the only part. Her hand. Just slightly. Her lawyer asked David a few questions in a quiet voice. David answered them in an even quieter voice. After about 10 minutes, Caroline stood up and walked out of the office without saying goodbye. She left the cease and desist on the table. Margaret started to cry then. Linda put her arm around her sister. I sat very still and looked at the small coffee ring on the conference table where Caroline's cup had been. I drove home alone that afternoon. The sky was the color of an old nickel. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Richard's chair, which I had never sat in before, not once in 46 years. The cushion was shaped like him. I did not cry. I drank my tea. That night, I slept for 9 hours. I had not slept 9 hours since 1978, when Margaret was a baby, and finally slept through the night for the first time. I woke up at 7 in the morning, and the house was quiet, and the iron was still on the ironing board where I had left it, and the receipt from a hotel in Asheville was still tucked into the back of my recipe box, where I had moved it years ago behind the index card for pot roast. I made myself a single piece of toast. I ate it slowly. I thought about Caroline driving home in her charcoal dress with the coffee stain on the cuff. I wondered if she had noticed it yet. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I rinsed my plate, put it in the rack to dry, and went out to the garden to cut back the roses. They had grown wild while I was not paying attention. It was time to bring them back into shape. Never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. Every swing brings you closer to your next home run.